Jake Morrison stared at the gray walls of his cell. 15 years. 15 years for defending himself against a Krellian merchant who tried to kill him. The alien had walked away with bruises. Jake got life in prison. That was justice in the Galactic Coalition. Humans were monsters, and monsters didn't deserve fair trials. He counted the scratches on the wall for the 1,000th time. 4,312 days. Each mark represented another sunset he couldn't see, another breath of recycled air, another meal of tasteless protein paste. Outside his small window, he could see other detention blocks stretching into the distance. Somewhere out there, 42,000 other humans sat in similar cells, guilty of crimes like fighting back or refusing to bow. The cell door opened without warning. Jake jumped to his feet, his muscles tense. Guards never came at this hour. 2 Vrellian officers stood in the doorway, their blue skin gleaming under the harsh lights. They looked nervous. "Prisoner Morrison, you're being released." Jake blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get moving." Something was wrong. They didn't just release humans. Not ever. Jake walked through corridors he hadn't seen in years, passing other cells where confused human prisoners were also being pulled out. The guards said nothing, just pushed them forward toward the processing center. In the large holding area, hundreds of humans gathered. Jake saw faces he recognized from the exercise yard. Tough men and women who had survived years of this place. Everyone whispered the same question. Why? On Earth. Captain Lisa Chen watched the stars from the command center of the Planetary Defense Network. 50 million humans lived on their homeworld, trapped behind an invisible cage. The barrier satellites had hummed for 200 years, keeping humanity locked away from the galaxy that feared them. Lisa's job was to monitor those satellites, to make sure no one left, to enforce humanity's prison sentence. She hated every second of it. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Coalition Command," her communications officer said. The young woman's voice was shaking. Lisa's heart skipped. The Coalition never called them. Ever. "Put it through." Quote, Ambassador Kelvin Ross appeared on the screen. He was an older man, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years representing humanity to a galaxy that despised them. Lisa saw something in his face she had never seen before. Hope. "Captain Chen, I need you to prepare the 1st Marine Division for immediate deployment. Full combat loadout." Lisa's mind raced. "Sir, we haven't been allowed to leave Earth in 2 centuries. What's happening?" Kelvin looked at something off-screen. "The Vraxis swarm has broken through the eastern frontier. The Coalition is losing. They're losing badly. They've called in the debt." The debt. Lisa knew the history. 200 years ago, when humanity first discovered faster-than-light travel, they had stumbled into a war. Young and stupid, they had helped the Coalition win. The Coalition had thanked them by quarantining Earth, declaring humanity too dangerous for civilized space. Now, they wanted help again. "How bad is it?" Lisa asked. 12 worlds gone in 3 weeks. The Coalition fleets are being slaughtered. Their weapons barely scratch the Vraxis ships, and their soldiers break when they see what's coming. They need Deathworlders. They need us. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest. And what do we get? Freedom. The quarantine ends. All restrictions lifted. They're even releasing the prisoners. Kelvin's expression hardened. But only if we save them first. Lisa wanted to refuse, wanted to tell the Coalition to solve their own problems. But she looked at the defensive screen showing Earth's cage and knew this was humanity's only chance. "How long do I have?" 48 hours to select your forces. They're sending transport ships." The screen went dark. Lisa turned to her officers. "You heard him. Get me 10,000 volunteers. The best we have. This is what we've been training for." In the detention center, Jake and the other prisoners were herded into a massive assembly hall. A holographic display flickered to life. showing the seal of the Galactic Coalition. A Trevelyan official appeared, her 4 eyes blinking slowly. Human prisoners. You are being offered a choice. The Coalition faces an existential threat. The Vraxis swarm is destroying our worlds. We need soldiers. We need you. She paused. Fight for us, and your sentences are cleared. All debts forgiven. You can return to Earth as free individuals. Refuse, and you return to your cells. Jake looked around the hall. 42,000 humans, all staring at the screen. Someone shouted from the back. Why should we help you? You put us in cages. The official's expression didn't change. Because if the Vraxis win, they will eventually reach Earth, and there will be no one left to stop them. Not even your precious barrier will protect you from what's coming. Jake thought about his cell. Thought about 15 more years of gray walls and protein paste. He thought about Earth, a planet he barely remembered, locked behind satellites and fear. He raised his hand. I'll fight. Around him, thousands of other hands went up. Some raised them quickly, eager for freedom. Others raised them slowly, knowing they were trading one death sentence for another. But they all raised them, because humans didn't like cages, and they would do anything to break free. Within a week, the human forces assembled. Lisa stood on the bridge of the UHSF Valiant, watching her fleet of 12 outdated coalition ships. They were old, barely functional, held together with spare parts and hope. The coalition had given humanity their garbage and expected miracles. Beside her stood Major Ryan Carter, a tall man with scars on his face and anger in his eyes. He had been in prison for 20 years for stopping a slave trading operation. The coalition called it excessive force. Ryan called it justice. They expect us to die, Ryan said quietly. These ships won't last a week in real combat. I know, Lisa replied. But we're not here to meet their expectations. We're here to exceed them. Jake Morrison stood in the troop bay with 300 other former prisoners, all wearing ill-fitting combat armor and carrying weapons they barely knew how to use. A sergeant walked down the line, checking equipment. Listen up, the sergeant barked. The coalition thinks we're cannon fodder. They think we'll panic when we see the Vraxis. They think we'll break. Are they right? No, sir, the troops shouted. Damn right they're not. We're humans. We're from Earth. We're Deathworlders. And we're going to show these aliens what that means. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, leaving Earth's orbit for the first time in 200 years. Ahead lay war, death, and a chance at freedom. Behind lay the cage they refused to return to. Jake looked out the porthole at the stars rushing past. After 15 years in a cell, he was finally moving forward. Whatever came next, it had to be better than standing still. He was wrong. What came next was worse than anything he could imagine, but it was also the beginning of everything humanity had been waiting for. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tarsus Prime system. What they saw made even the hardened veterans go quiet. 3 coalition cruisers were dying. Their shields flickered and failed as massive organic ships tore into them with weapons that looked like they were grown, not built. The Vraxis bioships moved like living things, their hulls pulsing and writhing. When coalition weapons hit them, the damaged sections simply healed, growing new armor, plating within seconds. Lisa watched from the bridge of the Valiant as one of the coalition ships exploded. Thousands of lives gone in an instant. The other coalition vessels were broadcasting evacuation orders, preparing to run. Captain, we're receiving orders from Coalition Command, her communications officer said. They want us to cover the retreat. Lisa's jaw tightened. They want us to die so they can run. Ryan stepped beside her. Your orders, Captain? Lisa looked at her small fleet. 12 old ships against a Vraxis armada. The smart move was to retreat. The safe move was to refuse the suicide mission. But Lisa hadn't come here to be smart or safe. All ships, Battle formation. We're attacking. The bridge went silent. Her tactical officer spoke up. Captain, we can't win this fight. Winning isn't the point. Fighting is. Humanity doesn't run. Send the message. The human fleet accelerated toward the Vraxis ships. The coalition forces couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans were charging straight into certain death. The first Vraxis bioship fired. Its weapon was some kind of plasma stream that melted through armor like it was paper. The UHSF Relentless took the hit straight on. Her shields collapsed, and her hull began to glow red-hot. Captain Greg Stone stood on the bridge of the Relentless, watching his ship die around him. Fires erupted across multiple decks. The life support system was failing. His crew looked at him, waiting for the evacuation order. Greg thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the barrier satellites that had kept him from ever meeting her. About 15 years of staring at stars he couldn't reach. He opened the ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. Abandoned ship procedures are cancelled. Engineering, give me everything the fusion core has left. All of it. His first officer understood immediately. Sir, that will cause a core breach. Quote, that's the idea. Helm, set collision course with that carrier. Full burn. The Relentless turned toward the largest Vraxis ship. Her engines roared to life one last time, pushing the dying vessel faster and faster. The Vraxis didn't understand what was happening, until it was too late. Greg sat in his command chair and smiled. For Earth, the Relentless struck the Vraxis carrier at full speed. The fusion core detonated on impact, creating a miniature sun that consumed both ships. The shockwave tore into 3 nearby Vraxis vessels, cracking their organic hulls and sending them spinning into space. Lisa watched the explosion from the Valiant's bridge. She had just lost a ship and 300 people. But she had also just shown the Vraxis that humans didn't surrender. They had shown the coalition what Deathworlders meant. All ships, follow the Relentless's example. When shields fail, ram them. When weapons run dry, use the ship itself. We're not here to survive. We're here to win. The battle turned into something the galaxy had never seen. Human ships fought like cornered animals. When the UHSF Defiant lost her main weapons, she used her emergency thrusters to spin and smash into a Vraxis destroyer. When the UHSF Thunder's engines failed, she vented her atmosphere directly at an enemy ship, freezing its organic weapon systems. But the real horror began when the humans started boarding. Corporal Katie Miller led her squad through the breach in a Vraxis bioship. The corridors were wet and pulsing, like being inside a living creature. The air was thick with toxins that made her suit's filters scream warnings. She could barely see through the organic mist that filled every passage. Contact front, someone shouted. The Vraxis warrior drone came around the corner like a nightmare. 3 meters tall, covered in black chitin armor, with claws that could tear through steel. It moved faster than something that size should be able to move. The coalition soldiers who had faced these things always broke, always ran. They couldn't handle the sight of the drones, couldn't process the horror of fighting something that looked like it crawled out of hell. Katie's squad opened fire. The drone's armor absorbed most of the shots, but it slowed. Katie rolled forward, getting under its guard, and fired her rifle point-blank into what she hoped was a weak spot. The drone screeched and grabbed her, lifting her off the ground. She dropped her rifle and pulled her combat knife. The drone brought her closer, opening its mouth to show rows of teeth designed to tear flesh. Katie jammed the knife into its eye and twisted hard. The drone dropped her and stumbled back. Her squad hit it with everything they had. It took 30 seconds of concentrated fire to put it down. Katie got to her feet, breathing hard. "That's one," she said. "There's about 1,000 more on this ship. Keep moving." They fought through corridors that tried to close around them. They fought in zero gravity when the ship's artificial systems failed. They fought when their ammunition ran low, when their suits were damaged, when half the squad was wounded. They fought because that's what humans did. Sergeant Nicole Brooks held a narrow corridor with 5 soldiers, while the main force pushed deeper into the ship. The Vraxis kept coming. Wave after wave of drones trying to break through. Her soldiers fired until their barrels glowed red-hot, until their weapons jammed, until they had nothing left but grenades and knives. "Fall back," her lieutenant ordered over the radio. "Your position is being overrun." Nicole looked at the corridor behind her. If the drones broke through, they would hit the main force from behind. Everyone would die. She switched her radio to the squad channel. "You heard the lieutenant. Fall back. That's an order." Her soldiers hesitated. "What about you, Sergeant? Someone has to hold the line. Now move." They ran. Nicole armed every grenade she had left and wedged them into the corridor walls. She set her rifle to full automatic and waited. The drones came like a flood, hundreds of them, scrambling over each other in their rush to kill. Nicole fired until her rifle melted. She detonated the grenades, bringing down half the corridor. She fought hand-to-hand with a combat knife against claws and teeth and acid. She killed 4 drones before they finally took her down, but the choke point held. The main force reached the Queen chambers and destroyed the ship's control center. The bioship died, and so did everything on it, including Nicole. When the battle ended 6 hours later, the Vraxis fleet was broken. 5 of their ships destroyed, 3 more crippled. The remaining vessels retreated, something the Coalition had never seen them do before. The humans had held Tarsus Prime. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Valiant, reading casualty reports. 4,000 dead. 1/3 of her entire force gone in a single battle. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the names. So many names. Kelvin's face appeared on her screen. "Captain Chen, the Coalition is calling it a miracle. You've stopped the Vraxis advance for the first time in this war." "The Vraxis? It cost us 4,000 lives," Lisa said quietly. "I know. But you've proven something important. You've proven that humans can win." Lisa looked at the Tarsus Prime colony on her display. 3 million aliens lived down there, alive because humans had bled for them. None of them would ever thank humanity. Most would still call humans monsters, but they were alive. "What now?" Lisa asked. "Now the Coalition wants more. 20 more systems under attack. They want human soldiers on every front line." Kelvin paused. "And Lisa, they're already preparing to negotiate our reward. I think we actually have a chance at freedom." Lisa nodded slowly. "Then we keep fighting. But Kelvin, make them pay for every drop of human blood. Make them pay everything." In the medical bay, Jake Morrison lay in a healing pod, his body covered in burns from fighting through the Vraxis ship. He had survived, when 300 others from his transport hadn't. He should feel lucky. Instead, he just felt tired. A nurse walked past, a Trevelyan who had been terrified of him when he first arrived. Now she stopped and bowed slightly. "Thank you, human. My family lives on Tarsus Prime. You saved them." Jake didn't know what to say. He had spent 15 years being treated like a monster. Now aliens were thanking him. The galaxy was changing. But he didn't know if it was changing fast enough. 3 months into the war, humanity was bleeding across 6 different battlefronts. Lisa's forces had been split into smaller groups, each one fighting desperate battles to hold Coalition worlds. The victories kept coming, but so did the casualty reports. 8,000 humans dead now, more wounded, more broken, Lisa commanded from the Valiant, jumping from crisis to crisis. Every day brought new requests for human soldiers, new worlds that needed saving, new battles that only Deathworlders could win. The Coalition had learned to depend on humanity's willingness to die for them. Kelvin was negotiating hard. Every human life was buying concessions from the Coalition. Technology transfers, trade agreements, mining rights in unclaimed systems, a seat on the High Council. The Coalition was desperate enough to promise anything, But Ryan Carter was starting to see cracks in those promises. He sat in his quarters aboard the Valiant, staring at a datapad. He had been digging through coalition networks, using access codes that former prisoners had stolen during their time in detention centers. What he found made his blood run cold. The files were marked Contingency Protocol, Post-War Human Management. Ryan read through pages of carefully worded plans. Military oversight of Earth. Genetic monitoring programs. Restricted breeding quotas. And at the bottom, buried in legal language, authorization for complete orbital sterilization of Earth if humanity became unmanageable. They were planning to cage humanity again, maybe even destroy them. All they were waiting for was the end of the war. Ryan brought the files to Lisa. She read them in silence, her face growing harder with each page. When she finished, she set the datapad down carefully, like it might explode. "How long have you known?" she asked. 2 days. "I wanted to verify everything before bringing it to you." After, Lisa stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "So we're dying for people who plan to kill us, or lock us up again?" "Same difference." Ryan joined her at the window. "What do we do?" Lisa was quiet for a long time. "We win. We win so completely, so decisively, that they're too afraid to try their contingency plans. We make humanity so valuable, so dangerous, so necessary that the coalition has no choice but to accept us as equals." "And how do we do that?" Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We stop defending. We start attacking." On the other side of the galaxy, Lieutenant Alex Bennett and his special operations team were deep behind Vraxis lines. They had been inserted 4 weeks ago with a mission everyone thought was impossible: capture a Queen node alive. The team of 15 had been moving through Vraxis-controlled space, avoiding patrols, studying the enemy. They watched how the bioships communicated, mapped their breeding facilities, learned their patterns. Alex had lost 3 people to Vraxis patrols, but the remaining 12 had become ghosts, moving through enemy territory like shadows. They found their target on a small moon, a Queen node facility, lightly defended because the Vraxis never expected anyone to come this deep into their space. Alex's team watched it for 3 days, learning guard rotations, counting drones, planning their approach. "This is suicide," Corporal Pete Davis whispered. He was young, barely 20, a former prisoner who had volunteered for this mission because anything was better than going back to a cell. "Everything we do is suicide," Alex replied. "But we do it anyway." They attacked at night, when the facility's biological rhythms were at their lowest. The team moved in fast, using shaped charges to blow through the outer wall. Inside, the facility was like a nightmare made real. Organic walls pulsed with veins of glowing fluid. The air was thick and hot, hard to breathe even through their filters. The Queen node was in the central chamber, a massive creature that was part of the ship network and part individual. It was connected to hundreds of organic cables, feeding information to the entire Vraxis fleet. Taking it meant fighting through 30 warrior drones. The battle lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of hell. Of fighting in confined spaces against enemies that wanted to tear them apart. Alex lost 4 more people. When the smoke cleared, 8 humans remained, all wounded, all running on adrenaline and spite. But they had the Queen. They cut it free from its connections and loaded it onto an anti-gravity sled. The Queen was still alive, still conscious, and Alex could see intelligence in its multiple eyes. It wasn't just a monster. It was thinking. Aware. Maybe even afraid. Why? It spoke through a translator they had brought. Its voice was like grinding stones. "Why do you fight for those who cage you?" Alex stared at it. "Because one day, the cage opens. And when it does, we want to be strong enough that they never close it again." The Queen went silent. Alex's team carried it back through 40 days of hostile territory, fighting, hiding, barely surviving. When they finally reached Coalition space, only 6 of the original 15 remained. But they had their prize. Coalition scientists studied the captured queen. And what they learned changed everything. The Vraxis weren't invading. They were running. Something had attacked their home galaxy. Something that ate entire worlds. The Vraxis had fled into Coalition space, not out of conquest, but out of desperation. They needed room to survive. Alex sat in the debriefing room, exhausted beyond words. The Coalition generals wanted to know every detail of his mission. They kept calling him a hero. He wanted to tell them that heroes didn't exist. Only people who refused to quit. Back on Earth, General Dan Foster watched millions of volunteers leaving the planet. Young men and women eager to fight, eager to leave the cage, eager to prove themselves. He approved every single one, but it made him sick inside. Dan had spent 40 years in Earth's defense forces. He had watched the barrier satellites every day, dreaming of the stars beyond. Now, humans were finally leaving, and it was to die for aliens who hated them. He received daily reports from Kelvin about the negotiations. The Coalition was promising everything, but Dan knew better. He had read history. Powerful people never gave up power willingly. The Coalition would use humanity until the Vraxis were beaten, then find a way to cage Earth again. Dan started preparing Earth's defenses for a different kind of war. Not against the Vraxis, but against the Coalition. He increased production of weapons and ships. He trained new divisions not for offensive operations, but for protecting Earth's orbit. He built hidden bases on the Moon and Mars, places where humanity could retreat if the Coalition came calling. When Kelvin found out, he was furious. Dan, we're trying to negotiate peace. You're preparing for war. No, I'm preparing for survival, Dan replied. The Coalition will betray us. Ryan found the proof. When that happens, Earth needs to be ready. Thank you for watching. And click that it click to bill. And the word. And click that it click to bill. Lisa called a meeting of her senior officers. 15 captains and commanders gathered in the Valiant's conference room. She showed them the contingency files. Showed them what the Coalition planned for humanity after the war. They think we'll just accept this, Lisa said. They think we'll be grateful for whatever scraps they give us. They're wrong. Creeper 7. Fording. They're wrong. Ryan brought up a holographic map of Vraxis space. The Coalition has been fighting defensive battles for 6 months. They're trying to protect what they have. That's not how you win wars. You win wars by breaking the enemy's ability to fight, Lisa continued. Not by defending against them, but by destroying them at their source. We're taking the war to the Vraxis home clusters. Her officers stared at her. Commander Helen Price spoke up. Captain, that's never been done. The Vraxis breed too fast. Their home territory is too vast. Every military simulation says it's impossible. The simulations don't account for one thing, Lisa replied. They don't account for humans who have nothing left to lose. She laid out her plan. 50 ships, 20,000 Marines. A direct assault on the heart of Vraxis space, targeting their breeding worlds and queen chambers. It was the most audacious military operation in Coalition history. It would also probably kill everyone involved. The Coalition will call us insane, Ryan said. They'll order us not to go. Then we ignore the orders, Lisa replied. We're not fighting for the Coalition anymore. We're fighting for humanity's future. Her officers looked at each other. Some were afraid. Some were angry. But all of them understood what was at stake. If humanity didn't win this war decisively, they would end up back in cages. Or worse. When do we leave? Commander Helen asked. 3 days. Tell your crews the truth. Tell them what the Coalition is planning. Tell them this might be a one-way trip. Anyone who wants out can leave now. No questions asked. Not a single person left. Jake Morrison heard about the plan in the troop bay. The officers were honest about the odds. One-way trip, minimal support, fighting through the densest Vraxis territory in the galaxy. Every military expert said it was suicide. Jake thought about his cell, thought about 15 years of gray walls, thought about Earth locked behind barriers. He checked his rifle and made sure his armor seals were tight. Suicide, the soldier next to him muttered. They're sending us on a suicide mission. We're humans, Jake replied. Everything we do is suicide, but we do it anyway, and somehow we survive. The human fleet prepared to leave. 50 ships, barely a fraction of the coalition's military power. But those 50 ships carried 20,000 humans, who had decided that freedom was worth dying for. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching her fleet assemble. She knew many of them wouldn't come back, knew that what she was planning might end in complete disaster. But she also knew that humanity's only chance was to win so completely that the coalition couldn't ignore them. All ships ready, Captain, Ryan reported. Then let's show them what Deathworlders really means, Lisa said. Take us to Vraxis Prime. The human fleet punched through the Vraxis defensive lines like a knife through flesh. Coalition forces watched in shock as 50 human ships ignored every tactical doctrine and drove straight into the heart of enemy territory. The admirals called it madness. Lisa called it necessary. They lost 3 ships in the first week. The Vraxis threw everything at them. Waves of bioships that tried to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. But human ships didn't retreat. When shields failed, they kept fighting. When hulls breached, they sealed sections and kept moving. When weapons ran dry, they rammed. The UHSF Guardian took critical damage on day 5. Captain Susan Blake had half her crew dead, and her ship was burning from the inside out. Coalition protocol said to abandon ship and scatter. Susan ordered her crew into escape pods, then flew her dying ship straight into a Vraxis command vessel. Both ships died in fire, but the Vraxis lost their tactical coordinator for the entire sector. By day 10, the human fleet reached Vraxis Prime. The homeworld was massive, 3 times the size of Earth, covered in organic structures that looked like they had grown rather than been built. Orbital defenses ringed the planet, thousands of weapon platforms and bioships. The Vraxis had never needed to defend their home before. Now, they learned what it meant to face desperate humans. Colonel Ben Harris led the ground assault. 20,000 Marines in drop pods, falling through a sky filled with anti-aircraft fire. Ben watched his display as pods started disappearing, shot down before they could land. The casualty counter climbed. 200, 500, 1,000. His pod hit the ground hard, crashing through organic structures that tried to grab it. Ben kicked the door open and rolled out, his rifle already firing. Around him, the landing zone was chaos. Drop pods scattered across kilometers of hostile territory. Vraxis warrior drones rushed from every direction, their numbers seemingly endless. "Establish perimeter," Ben shouted into the command channel. "Hold what you can," but there was no holding. The Vraxis kept coming, wave after wave. Ben's division took 80% casualties in the first hour. Of the 20,000 who landed, only 4,000 were still fighting by nightfall. But those 4,000 refused to break. Sergeant Nicole Brooks had somehow survived Tarsus Prime. Now she found herself in hell again, holding a defensive position with 12 Marines against hundreds of drones. Her armor was cracked, her rifle was almost empty, and she was pretty sure her left arm was broken. "They just keep coming," someone shouted. "Then we keep killing them." Nicole fired until her rifle's barrel glowed red hot. When it seized up, she grabbed a fallen Marine's weapon and kept fighting. "We don't need to win. We just need to hold long enough for the main force." The main force was Ben's strike team, pushing toward the Queen Chambers deep underground. They fought through tunnels that writhed and tried to close around them. They fought through toxic gas that ate through their armor filters. They fought through spaces so tight they had to crawl. while drones attacked from every angle. Ben lost half his team in the first kilometer. The Vraxis adapted fast, learning human tactics, finding weaknesses. But humans adapted faster. When the tunnels became too narrow, they used explosives to make them wider. When the toxic gas became too thick, they sealed their suits and went on oxygen reserves. When the drones learned to avoid their gunfire, humans switched to hand-to-hand combat. Private Kyle Nash was 19 years old. He had volunteered because Earth's cage felt like it was crushing him. Now he was dying in a Vraxis tunnel. 3 drones tearing at his armor. He had dropped his rifle somewhere back in the darkness. His knife was stuck in a drone's chest. He had nothing left but his hands and his anger. Kyle grabbed the nearest drone and headbutted it, cracking his helmet visor. The toxic atmosphere rushed in, burning his lungs. He didn't care. He was already dead. Might as well take these things with him. He fought until his body gave out, until darkness took him. The drones died with him, crushed by human strength born of desperation. Captain Chris Rodriguez flew his fighter through the Vraxis orbital defense network. His mission was simple: clear a path for the bombers. His squadron of 40 had been cut down to 5 in the first attack run. Now it was just him and his wingman, Lieutenant Michelle Adams. "Chris, we can't hold them off alone," Michelle said over the radio. Her fighter was trailing smoke, one engine dead. "We don't have to hold long, just long enough." Chris checked his ammunition. Almost empty. His shields were gone. His fighter had more holes than hull. "Stay with me, Michelle." One more run. They dove through a swarm of Vraxis defense drones, taking fire from every direction. Chris's cockpit lit up with damage warnings. He ignored them all. The target was ahead. The entrance to the Queen Chambers. A massive organic structure that pulsed with energy. The bombers were 30 seconds behind them. 30 seconds was forever in a dogfight. Chris and Michelle spun and dodged, drawing fire, keeping the Vraxis focused on them. Michelle's fighter took a direct hit. Chris watched as her wing sheared off. "Chris, I'm hit bad. Losing control. Eject. Eject now." "Negative. I'm lined up on target. Tell my mom I finally found something worth dying for." Michelle's fighter screamed toward the organic structure, her remaining engine at full power. She didn't eject. She rode her fighter straight into the entrance, her fusion core detonating on impact. The explosion tore open the Queen Chamber's outer defenses. Chris flew through the gap she had made, tears streaming down his face. The bombers followed, releasing their payload. Human-designed fusion weapons that burned hotter than stars. The bombs fell into the Queen Chambers and detonated. Vraxis Prime screamed. The entire planet shuddered as the Queen network died. Every Vraxis drone across the surface froze for 3 seconds, their hive connection severed. Then they went berserk, attacking each other, attacking the very planet they were meant to defend. Ben's strike team felt the change immediately. The organized resistance collapsed into chaos. The drones stopped coordinating, stopped adapting, stopped being an army. They became individual monsters, dangerous, but no longer unstoppable. "Push forward," Ben ordered. Into the Queen Chambers. His team, now down to just 200 Marines, charged into the burning heart of Vraxis Prime. They found the Queens, massive creatures whose bodies stretched hundreds of meters, connected to the planet itself through organic cables. The Queens were dying, burning from the inside, but they were still conscious, still aware. One Queen spoke through a translator, its voice filled with pain. "You have killed us all. Why? Why fight so hard for those who hate you?" Ben stared at the dying creature. Part of him felt pity. These beings were just trying to survive, fleeing from something worse. But then he thought of the 12 coalition worlds they had destroyed, the billions dead, the humans who had died to stop them. "Because someone has to stand in the gap," Ben said. "Someone has to pay the price for survival. Today, that's you. Tomorrow, it might be us. But we're still here, still fighting, Because that's what humans do. The Queen died without another word. The network collapsed completely. Across Vraxis Prime, the drones fell silent. Their connection to the hive mind severed. The planet itself began to die, its organic systems failing without the Queens to maintain them. In orbit, Lisa watched the destruction from the Valiant's bridge. Her fleet of 50 ships was now down to 32. 14,000 of her 20,000 Marines were dead or missing. The cost had been staggering, but they had won. They had destroyed Vraxis Prime, killed the Central Queen network, broken the Hive's ability to coordinate. Across the galaxy, Vraxis forces were suddenly confused, leaderless, vulnerable. The Coalition fleet, which had been retreating for months, finally pushed back. Ryan stood beside Lisa, watching the readings from the planet below. We did it. We actually did it. At what cost? Lisa looked at the casualty reports still coming in. So many names. So many people who would never see Earth again. 14,000 dead, Ryan. 14,000. They chose this. They knew what they were signing up for. Ryan put a hand on her shoulder. And because of them, the Coalition's response came within hours. Messages flooded in from every corner of civilized space. Shock. Awe. Fear. Humanity had done what the Coalition said was impossible. They had taken the war to the enemy's heart and won. But Lisa knew the real battle was just beginning. They had proven humanity was strong. Now, they had to prove they deserved to be free. Jake Morrison crawled out of a collapsed tunnel on Vraxis Prime, his armor torn, his body covered in wounds. Around him, other survivors were gathering. Of the 300 who had dropped with him, only 47 remained. They looked at each other with tired eyes, too exhausted even to celebrate. We won, someone said. It sounded like a question. Jake looked up at the sky, where human ships orbited the dying world. Yeah, we won. Now let's see if it was worth it. The fleet prepared to leave Vraxis Prime, carrying the survivors and leaving behind the dead. Behind them, the planet died slowly, its organic systems failing, its atmosphere becoming toxic even to the creatures that had built it. In 2 months, the Vraxis presence in the galaxy would be scattered, broken, no longer a threat. Humanity had paid for that victory with 30,000 lives total. 30,000 people who would never see Earth again, never know if their sacrifice meant freedom or just a longer cage. But they had fought anyway, because that's what humans did. They paid the price, whatever it was, because the alternative was standing still. And humans never stood still for long. The war ended 3 months after Vraxis Prime fell. With the Hive network destroyed, the remaining Vraxis forces lost all coordination. Coalition fleets finally went on the offensive, pushing the scattered aliens back into the outer reaches of space. What had been an existential threat became a cleanup operation. Humanity had won the war. Now they had to win the peace. The High Council called for a grand ceremony on the Coalition capital world of Velara. They built monuments to honor the fallen. They prepared medals and speeches. Ambassadors from 100 species gathered to thank humanity for their sacrifice. It looked like the galaxy was ready to welcome humanity as equals. Kelvin knew better. He sat in his quarters the night before the ceremony, reading the official documents the Coalition had prepared. Page after page of carefully worded gratitude, promises of limited trading rights, restricted travel permits, and buried in the legal language, continued military oversight of Earth for the safety of the galactic community. They were going to cage humanity again, just with prettier words this time. Kelvin contacted Lisa on a secure channel. Her face appeared on the screen, tired and older than when the war started. She had aged 10 years in 10 months. The Council is going to betray us, Kelvin said without preamble. I've seen the documents. They're offering us scraps. Lisa nodded slowly. I expected that. Ryan found their contingency plans months ago. They were always going to do this. Then what do? We can't fight the entire Coalition. Even humanity has limits. When we were seen, we make them understand that caging us again isn't an option. Lisa's eyes were hard. Tell them I want to address the council. Tell them I want to speak before they announce their decision. The ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Hall, a massive structure that could hold 10,000 beings. Representatives from every coalition species filled the seats. Humans sat in a small section near the back, still outsiders, even after everything they had done. The council chair, an elderly Trevelyan named Elder Voss, stood at the central podium. His 4 eyes swept across the crowd. We are here to honor the humans who gave their lives to save our civilization. 30,000 brave souls who stood against the darkness and won. He paused for effect. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. Kelvin sat in the audience, his hands clenched. The speeches went on for an hour. Praise for human courage, gratitude for human sacrifice. But no mention of freedom, no talk of equality. Just pretty words covering an ugly truth. Finally, Elder Voss reached the announcement everyone was waiting for. And now, we present humanity with their reward for service. We offer expanded trading privileges, cultural exchange programs, and a path toward limited coalition membership over the next century. A century. They wanted humanity to wait 100 more years. Lisa stood up in the human section. Her dress uniform was crisp, but everyone could see the scars on her face. The weight she had lost. The hardness in her eyes. She walked toward the podium. Without being invited. Captain Chen, this is not the appropriate time, Elder Voss said. Please return to your seat. No. Lisa's voice carried across the hall. You will hear what I have to say. You owe us that much. The hall went silent. Coalition security forces moved toward Lisa, but Kelvin stood up with dozens of other humans. The message was clear. Touch her, and there would be consequences. Elder Voss hesitated, then gestured to the guards to stop. Very well. Speak. Lisa stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled species. 30,000 humans died for you. They died on Tarsus Prime, on Helios 7, on a dozen other worlds. They died in space battles where they rammed their ships into the enemy because they had nothing else left to give. They died on Vraxis Prime, deep underground, fighting hand-to-hand against monsters because that's what you needed them to do. The hall remained silent. Lisa continued. My soldiers died for species that called them monsters. They died for civilizations that had locked their homeworld behind barrier satellites for 200 years. They died for people who put them in prisons for defending themselves. Lisa pulled out a datapad and held it up. This is what the Coalition really thinks of humanity. These are your contingency plans. Military oversight of Earth. Genetic monitoring programs. Orbital sterilization authorization, if we become unmanageable. You were planning to cage us again the moment the war ended. Elder Voss's eyes widened. Those documents are classified. How did you... Quote, it doesn't matter how we got them. What matters is that they exist. Lisa's voice grew harder. You used us. You sent us to die. And you were planning to lock us away again. You think we'll accept that? Around the hall, Coalition representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry that their plans had been exposed. Ryan stood in the human section and activated a holographic display. Images appeared above the crowd. Human ships destroying the barrier satellites around Earth. Thousands of human civilian vessels pouring out of the solar system, heading for unclaimed space. Construction facilities on the Moon and Mars building more ships. While we've been fighting your war, Ryan said, Earth has been preparing. The barrier is broken. Humanity is leaving, whether you like it or not. We're claiming colony rights in the outer sectors. We're building our own fleet. We're done asking for permission. The hall erupted in chaos. Species shouted at each other. The Krellian ambassador stood up and demanded military action against Earth. The Trevelyan representatives called for calm. Elder Voss tried to restore order and failed. Lisa waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. You have a choice. Accept humanity as equals, full members of the coalition, with all rights and protections, or try to stop us. And if you choose to stop us, understand what that means. You'll be going to war with a species that just broke your strongest enemy. A species that fights to the last breath. A species that would rather burn the galaxy than go back in a cage. Jake Morrison watched from the audience, his heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment that would decide humanity's future. Freedom or war. Acceptance or annihilation. The coalition could choose either path. General Dan Foster's face appeared on every screen in the hall, broadcasting from Earth. This is General Dan Foster, of the Earth Defense Force. I speak for 50 million humans who are watching this ceremony. We want peace. We want to join the galactic community as equals. But if you choose war, know that Earth is ready. Our orbital defenses are active, our fleets are mobilized, and we have something you don't. We have nothing left to lose. The threat was clear. The coalition could have peace with humanity as equals, or war with Deathworlders, who had just proven they could destroy entire civilizations. Elder Voss looked at Lisa, then at the screens showing Earth's preparations. He was old enough to remember when the coalition had first quarantined Earth. Back then, humanity had a few primitive ships and limited weapons. Now they had a battle-tested fleet and soldiers who could walk through hell without breaking. The council will deliberate. Elder Voss finally said. No, Lisa replied. You will decide now. We're done. Waiting. The silence stretched. Elder Voss looked at the other council members. Some nodded. Some looked away. The Krellian ambassador stormed out of the hall in protest. Finally, Elder Voss spoke. The coalition accepts humanity's terms. Full membership, equal rights, no restrictions. The quarantine is officially ended as of this moment. Lisa didn't smile. She just nodded. Good. Now we can talk about reparations for 200 years of imprisonment. Kelvin wanted to laugh. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had forced the galaxy to accept them. Not through begging, but through strength. Not through submission, but through sacrifice. The ceremony ended in chaos. Half the coalition was celebrating. Half was preparing for what this meant for the balance of power. The galaxy had just been forced to acknowledge that humans were equals, and nobody knew what that would mean for the future. Lisa walked out of the assembly hall with her officers. Jake joined them, still processing what had just happened. We're free, Jake said. It still didn't feel real. For now, Lisa replied. But freedom isn't something you win once. It's something you defend every day. The coalition accepted us because they're afraid. Fear can turn into hate very quickly. Then we'll deal with hate when it comes, Ryan said. Right now, let's just take the win. On Earth, people watched the ceremony on screens across the planet. When Elder Voss announced humanity's acceptance, cities erupted in celebration. 50 million people who had lived their entire lives in a cage suddenly found the door open. General Dan stood in the command center, watching the celebrations. He didn't trust the coalition's acceptance. Didn't believe they would really treat humanity as equals. But for tonight, he could let people have hope. Over the next year, humans spread across the galaxy. They established colonies on dozens of worlds. They built trade networks and diplomatic relationships. Some species welcomed them. Others kept their distance, still afraid of Deathworlders. But none of them tried to stop humanity. Because everyone remembered what happened when you backed humans into a corner. Lisa retired from military service and became Earth's representative to the High Council. She spent her days negotiating treaties and trade agreements, always pushing for humanity's interests. Some called her too aggressive. She called it making up for lost time. Jake Morrison settled on a colony world called New Hope. It was a harsh planet, Class 9 Death World by Coalition standards. Most species wouldn't even land there. Jake found it peaceful. He spent his days farming, watching the two suns set, knowing he would never see another cage again. Kelvin retired after securing a comprehensive treaty that guaranteed human rights across Coalition space. He returned to Earth and spent his remaining years teaching at the Diplomatic Academy, training the next generation of humans who would navigate the complex politics of the galaxy. Ryan stayed in the military, commanding humanity's growing fleet. He never forgot the contingency plans, never stopped preparing for the day the Coalition might try to cage humanity again. He made sure every human ship had the weapons and training to fight back if that day came. 10 years after the war ended, a monument was built on Earth. It stood in the center of the capital city, a massive structure of black stone. On it were carved 30,000 names, the humans who had died to buy humanity's freedom. At the base of the monument, a simple inscription: "The debt was paid in fire. The cage is broken. We walk among the stars not as monsters, but as equals, who earned their place through sacrifice and strength." Jake stood before the monument on the 10th anniversary of the ceremony. Around him, thousands of humans gathered to remember, to honor the dead, to remind themselves of the price of freedom. A young woman stood beside him, barely 20 years old. She had been born after the quarantine ended, had grown up in a galaxy where humans were respected members of the Coalition. "Did you know any of them?" she asked. Looking at the names, Jake nodded. "I fought with some of them, died next to others. They gave everything so people like you could grow up free." "Why? Why did they do it?" Jake looked at the monument, remembering the battles, the fear, the desperation. "Because someone had to. Because freedom isn't free. Because humans don't stay in cages, no matter what it costs to break out." The young woman was quiet for a moment. "Would you do it again, knowing the cost?" One of the teller. One. Jake thought about his 15 years in prison, thought about the battles, the friends he had lost, the scars he still carried. Yes, every time. Because the alternative is standing still, and humans were never meant to stand still. Above them, human ships crossed the sky, coming and going from Earth freely. The barrier satellites were gone, dismantled, and turned into scrap metal. Humanity had gone from prisoners to equals in less than a generation. The galaxy would never be the same. Jake looked at the young woman and smiled. "You live in a different universe than I grew up in. Make sure it stays that way. Make sure no one ever tries to cage humanity again." She nodded solemnly. "We won't let them. I promise." Jake believed her. The debt had been paid. The cage was broken. And humanity would never be imprisoned again. The stars belonged to everyone now.